wild hog invasion has reached a level far beyond anything most farmers ever imagined. What once seemed like an occasional nuisance has turned into a full-scale crisis zone that's growing faster than anyone can keep up with. These animals are no longer showing up in small groups or isolated areas. They're spreading across counties, ripping through fields, pastures, even creeping into neighborhoods. It's not just bad, it's out of control. Farmers are overwhelmed. They've built fences, set traps, called for help, but the hogs keep coming. Stronger, smarter, more aggressive. Fields that took months to plant are destroyed in a single night. Water lines get ripped up, soil gets eroded, and young livestock are attacked without warning. And the worst part, the numbers keep rising. The more they're hunted, the more they scatter and multiply. This isn't just about crop loss anymore, it's about survival, about keeping the land alive for the next season and the one after that. The scale of destruction has surpassed what most folks thought possible. But now, reality has hit. The alarm is sounding. And if something isn't done soon, we may be looking at damage we can't undo. The farmers can't fight this alone, and that's why we're here. Should we support the hunting of wild hogs to protect farmers' crops? This isn't just a question of agriculture or environmental management, it's a deeply controversial moral debate. On one hand, you have hard-working farmers who depend on every row of crops and every animal they raise to survive. These are people who've watched their blood, sweat, and effort destroyed by an invasive species. Wild hogs don't just tear up farmland, they threaten livestock, damage property, and pose a real danger to human safety. To many rural families, hunting them isn't a sport, it's a necessary act of defense. But on the other side, there are strong voices calling this practice unethical, even cruel. Using guns, dogs, and traps to chase down and kill a living creature even, one that's invasive or raises serious concerns. Some argue it's hypocritical to blame these animals for simply doing what they were born to do, survive. After all, wasn't it humans who brought them here in the first place? Should animals suffer for our mistakes? Things get even murkier when you consider long-term effectiveness. Critics say hunting is just a short-term fix-it, doesn't solve the root problem. They call for other methods: fencing, sterilization, relocation. But who's going to pay for all that? The farmers? The government? Meanwhile, the damage continues, and harvests are wiped out. So what do we choose, compassion for animals or protection for the people who feed the country? Maybe there is no perfect answer, but one thing is certain: doing nothing isn't an option. As wild hogs continue to spread and destroy, someone has to take action. Whether we like it or not, the land won't defend itself. Supporters of wild hog hunting strongly believe that it is not only justified, but absolutely necessary, especially when it comes to protecting farmers and their livelihoods. To them, this isn't just about removing an invasive species, it's about standing up for the people who work the land every day, season after season, only to watch it get destroyed overnight by a threat they didn't ask for and can't handle alone. Feral hogs reproduce at an astonishing rate, often doubling their numbers in just a matter of months. They travel in large, aggressive groups, ripping through fences, uprooting crops, destroying irrigation systems, and even attacking young livestock. In many rural communities, the destruction is relentless and overwhelming. One night is all it takes for an entire field of corn or soybeans to be wiped out. For small family farms living on tight margins, losses like that can be devastating. Supporters argue that other methods like fencing, sterilization, or trapping gear are either too slow, too expensive, or simply not effective enough. Hogs adapt quickly. They break through barriers, outsmart traps, and avoid heavily trafficked areas. Meanwhile, the damage continues. Hunting, especially when done in a coordinated and responsible way, is seen as the most immediate and effective tool available. It allows people to take direct action, reduce hog numbers quickly, and protect what matters most. But this isn't about sport or thrills. For most hunters, there's no joy in pulling the trigger. It's a serious task rooted in necessity. These hunts are often done in cooperation with local farmers, at great personal risk and effort, often involving hours of tracking in dangerous terrain. It's not easy, and it's not taken lightly. In the eyes of supporters, turning a blind eye to this problem is the real cruelty, because every time we hesitate, another farmer pays the price. They believe that if we truly care about the people who feed this country, we have to stand behind the efforts to defend their land. And sometimes, that means picking up a rifle and doing what needs to be done. Opponents of wild hog hunting argue that while the damage caused by feral hogs is real, the solution should not be more violence. To them, the widespread use of hunting, especially aggressive methods involving dogs, traps, or helicopters, is both unethical and short-sighted. They believe that even invasive species deserve a degree of humane treatment, and that the brutality of many hunting practices crosses a moral line that society should not accept. One of their core arguments is that hunting does not offer a long-term solution. While it may reduce numbers temporarily, hog populations often rebound quickly due to their high reproductive rate. In some cases, intense hunting pressure can actually make the problem worse, causing hogs to scatter into new areas, expanding their range. Opponents argue that relying on hunting is like putting a bandage on a wound that needs surgery. It may look like progress, but it doesn't solve the root problem. They also point out that there are alternatives. Advanced fencing systems, sterilization programs, habitat modification, and government-supported population control measures can offer more lasting results without resorting to widespread killing. These solutions may be slower and more costly up front, but opponents believe they are more ethical, controlled, and sustainable over time. Animal welfare is another major concern. Opponents are deeply troubled by images and reports of wounded hogs, prolonged chases with dogs, or hogs being gunned down from helicopters. They see these methods as cruel and unnecessary, and worry about the message it sends that wildlife can be dealt with using force alone. Finally, many opponents argue that humans bear responsibility for this crisis. Feral hogs were brought to North America by humans in the first place, released for food, hunting, or by accident. Punishing the animals for a problem we created, they argue, is not justice, it's avoidance. To opponents, the answer lies not in pulling more triggers, but in rethinking how we interact with nature. They believe solutions rooted in science, compassion, and accountability will ultimately do more to heal the land than any bullet ever could. In my personal opinion, hunting wild hogs is absolutely necessary for farmers. For them, it's not a choice, it's survival. The people who usually oppose hog hunting are often those who've never lost anything to it. They don't wake up to fields torn apart. They don't have to explain to their families why the crops they planted, tended, and counted on are suddenly gone because of one night's damage. It's easy to speak in ideals and quote ethics when the problem isn't in your backyard. These critics often talk about compassion, alternative methods, or the rights of animals, but they do so from a distance, shielded from the reality of rural life. Until they experience the heartbreak of watching their hard work be destroyed overnight, or the fear of a hog charging into their land, their views remain detached. They don't know what it's like to pour everything into the soil only to watch it get ripped apart by something you can't reason with. Farmers don't hunt because they want to. They hunt because they have to. When no one else steps in to help, they're left to defend their land, their animals, and their futures, the only way they can. So yes, I believe wild hog hunting is justified, because when people have everything to lose, they deserve the right to protect it. I used to think hunting was just a hobby, something people did for sport, for adrenaline, maybe just to pass the time. I didn't understand the weight behind it. But that was before I saw what wild hogs can really do. Before I stood in a field with a farmer at sunrise, watching him look over what was left of his crop destroyed, scattered, gone after just one night. Now, hunting isn't entertainment, it's responsibility. It's hard to describe the look in a farmer's eyes when he realizes his whole season is gone. Months of work, thousands of dollars, hopes for feeding his family or paying off dead tall crushed by a herd of feral hogs that showed up without warning. It's not just about the land, it's about dignity, pride, and survival. I couldn't stand by anymore. I couldn't look at those ruined fields and do nothing. So I picked up my rifle, trained hard, and joined the hunt. Not for fun, not for trophies, but because someone has to. Because while others debate what's right, the farmers are out there losing everything. Now, every time I go into the woods, I carry that weight. It's not about mayas, about protecting the people who grow our food, who work harder than anyone, and who deserve better than to be left alone in the fight. This is no longer a game, it's my duty. Let's come together because protecting our farmers isn't something that only belongs to those carrying rifles. You don't have to be out in the woods, knee-deep in mud, chasing down wild hogs to make a difference. There are so many ways to help. Spread awareness about the real damage feral hogs are causing. Support local farmers through community programs, local markets, or even just lending a hand during harvest season. Advocate for better funding and resources to help rural communities manage invasive species. Push for policy changes that make it easier for landowners to protect their property. You can also volunteer with land management programs, donate to organizations working on humane and effective hog control methods, or simply listen to the people who are living this fight every day. Their stories matter. Their struggles are real. Every action, big or small, adds up. The fight against wild hogs isn't just a hunter's job. It's a community effort. If we all do our part, we can protect the land, the food, and the families that keep this country going. You don't need a gun to stand with farmers. You just need the will to command, the courage to act. Another harvest crushed by wild boars. Farmers stand in ruined fields, empty-handed and teary-eyed. Please lend a hand so their sweat won't turn into tears. On the vast, endless fields of America, wild boars are becoming a serious threat to farmers. They invade farming areas, destroying crops and damaging the land, leaving farmers who are already struggling with nature helpless in the face of a new threat, these relentless invaders. During the day, the scorching sunlight does little to alleviate the anxiety caused by the boars. At night, they become even more aggressive, roaming the fields, leaving deep tracks that ruin rows of corn, rice, and potatoes, rendering the hard work of farmers meaningless. The fertile soil, carefully preserved by generations of ancestors, seems to have lost its value as wild boars take over, overwhelming everything in their path. Despite the farmers' best efforts to drive them away building fences and setting traps, nothing seems to work. The wild boars, with their intelligence and survival skills, are not easily defeated. The farmers have tried using chemicals, setting up various types of traps, but none have been able to stop the destruction caused by the boars. Despair grows heavier on their shoulders as one crop after another is ruined, and their livelihoods dwindle away. Now, the only hope they have is the hunters' experienced individuals skilled in tracking and controlling wild animals. With weapons in hand and knowledge of how to hunt wild boars, these hunters are the last resort for farmers to regain control of their land. Each hunting trip, each step taken by the hunters on the fields carries the hope that they will bring peace back to the land so that wild boars are no longer a nightmare. However, until that happens, the battle continues, not only a battle for the farmers, but also for the hunters, against these unpredictable wild creatures. We, the seasoned hunters, never wanted to resort to killing animals in such a manner, but we find ourselves with no other choice. The farmers have reached the point of complete despair, and we must help them. It is not something we take lightly. Over the years, we have learned to respect nature and the creatures that inhabit it. We understand the delicate balance between man and beast, and how one action can ripple through the environment. But these wild boars, with their relentless destruction, have pushed the farmers to the brink, and now we are their last hope. Our decision to hunt is not driven by a thirst for violence, but by necessity. We've seen the anguish in the farmers' eyes as they look at their ruined crops, the devastation that threatens to ruin everything they've worked for. We know that if we don't intervene, the cycle of destruction will continue, and the very livelihood of these farmers will be lost. It is a difficult decision, but one that we must make for the greater good. With each hunt, we carry the weight of this responsibility. We are not just killing animals, we are trying to restore balance, to bring back the harmony that once existed. We aim to protect the land, the crops, and the farmers who depend on them. It is a job we don't take lightly, but it's one that must be done. The hunt wasn't easy. These creatures are fast, cunning, and relentless. But with years of experience under our belts, we knew how to track them, how to anticipate their movements, and how to respond when the moment was right. We moved silently, carefully, every step deliberate, understanding the weight of what we were doing. By the time the sun began to set, we had managed to reduce the threat, at least for now. The fields, which had been ravaged by the boars earlier, now had a moment of reprieve. The farmers, though exhausted and worn, could see the glimmer of hope once again. We had done what we could today, but we knew the fight wasn't over. This was just one battle in a much longer war. The wild boars would come back, and we would be ready to defend the land once more. On today's hunting trip, we successfully brought down more than 30 wild boars. It was a long and arduous day, but as we made our way through the fields, we knew it was necessary to prevent further destruction. Each boar we took down was a small victory, a step closer to restoring some sense of peace and balance for the farmers. The next morning, we set out once again for the hunt. Today, the wild boars we encountered were massive, unlike anything we had seen before. Their sheer size was intimidating, their tusks sharp and threatening. It felt like a new level of challenge, one that tested not just our skills, but our resolve. As we tracked them through the dense underbrush, The weight of the task ahead weighed heavily on us. These were no ordinary boars. They were older, stronger, and more aggressive, as if they were the leaders of the pack. We moved with caution, knowing that any misstep could be costly. Every time one of us took a shot, we held our breath, hoping it would land true. The day passed in a blur of action, adrenaline, and exhaustion. We couldn't keep track of how many we had brought down, the numbers blending together as the hunt continued. What mattered was the result. We knew we had made a significant dent in the boar population, but the exact count was uncertain. It didn't matter anymore. The victory felt hollow. We had done what we had to do, but the boars kept coming, and we could only wonder how long this fight would last. By the time we returned to camp, there was no celebration, no sense of triumph. The job was done, but the reality of the ongoing battle hung in the air. We were just one step closer to helping the farmers, but the war was far from over. We moved on to another area, a place where the wild boars were far more intelligent and aggressive. These boars seemed to have learned from their past encounters with us, and they were not easy targets. As soon as we entered their territory, we could feel the tension in the air, a sense that these creatures were not going to be easily outsmarted. They moved with surprising speed, darting through the thick underbrush and avoiding our shots with an almost uncanny precision. Every time we thought we had one in our sights, it would disappear into the shadows, leaving us frustrated and exhausted. It was like a game of cat and mouse, with the wild boars always staying one step ahead of us. We had to be even more careful and patient than before. The boars weren't just running blindly, they were actively dodging, using the terrain to their advantage. Their intelligence made them even more dangerous, as they knew exactly how to evade us and where to hide. Every step we took felt like we were being hunted just as much as we were hunting them. The chase was relentless, and it became clear that this was no ordinary hunt. It wasn't just about tracking and shooting anymore. We had to think like the boars, anticipate their next moves, and adjust our strategy on the fly. They were a formidable adversary, and we were beginning to realize just how much more we had to give if we were going to succeed. But we had no choice. We couldn't stop now. The farmers were counting on us, and we had to finish what we started, no matter how hard it became. After clearing the wild boars from the vast fields, we pressed on, moving deeper into the dark, dense forests. The air in the woods was thick with moisture, and the shadows seemed to close in around us. The light barely filtered through the towering trees, creating a foreboding atmosphere. But we couldn't stop now. We had cleared the fields, but the boars had likely retreated into these woods, finding sanctuary in the darkness where they felt safe. With every step, the forest grew more oppressive. The ground was soft and uneven, covered with fallen leaves and tangled roots. It was more difficult to move quickly, and the constant rustling of leaves underfoot made us cautious. But the boars were still out there, and we had to find them before they regrouped and caused more destruction. The chase in the woods was different from the open fields. Here, the boars could hide in the underbrush, their dark shapes blending seamlessly with the surroundings. We had to be extra vigilant, using every skill and tactic we had learned over the years to track their movements. The trees and thick foliage made it harder to get a clear shot, and we had to rely on our senses, listening for the slightest sound of movement or the snap of a twig. Hours passed as we combed through the forest, the hunt becoming more exhausting with every step. The wild boars, still as clever and elusive as before, managed to stay just out of reach, evading our traps and avoiding our shots. It felt like we were being tested, pushed to our limits, but we couldn't give up. The farmers were depending on us, and we knew that as long as there were boars left in these woods, we couldn't stop searching. The forest seemed endless, but we pressed on, determined to finish what we had started. In addition to using firearms to take down the wild boars, we also had another method: large steel traps. These traps were an essential tool in our hunt, especially when dealing with the more cunning boars that were skilled at evading gunshots. The steel traps were heavy duty, designed to hold the boar securely once caught. We would set them up in areas where we believed the boars were likely to pass through, such as near feeding spots or along their usual paths. The process of setting the traps required careful planning and patience. We had to choose the right location, ensuring that the boars wouldn't notice the trap before stepping into it. It was a delicate balance: too obvious and they'd avoid it, too hidden and we might miss them entirely. Once the traps were set, we would retreat and wait, watching from a distance, hoping the boars would wander into the carefully laid snare. Using these traps was both a strategic and tiring approach. While it didn't offer the immediate satisfaction of taking down a boar with a well-aimed shot, it allowed us to deal with the problem over time, without the need for constant pursuit. There was a sense of relief when a boar was successfully trapped. It meant one less to worry about, one less to evade our guns or destroy the crops. The traps were not foolproof though. Boars are smart, and sometimes they would sense the trap's presence or avoid it altogether. But over time, with patience and persistence, we found them to be an invaluable tool in our efforts. It wasn't always glamorous, but it was effective. And in the end, that's what mattered. Whether we used guns or traps, our goal was always the same: to protect the land, the crops, and the livelihoods of the farmers who had placed their trust in us. Each hunt, each trap we set, was a step closer to ensuring that the farmers would have a harvest to bring in. It wasn't just about removing the boars, it was about restoring hope. We knew how much effort the farmers put into their work, how every season was a gamble, and how the boars could undo months of hard labor in a single night. We had witnessed their frustration, their desperation, and it drove us to push forward, even when the task seemed overwhelming.
Wild pigs are destroying the country, and we let them breed uncontrollably. It's hard to believe, but it's the harsh reality we're facing. Wild pigs, an invasive species, are not just invading but are ravaging the land, crops, the lives of millions of farmers, and threatening the stability of this entire country. What's even more appalling, what makes us unable to bear it any longer, is this: we, a civilized society, full of technology and knowledge, are allowing these pigs to breed and multiply, while their destruction worsens every day. Imagine this: thousands of hectares of farmland are turned upside down, crops destroyed overnight. Rice fields, corn, cassava, the hard-earned values of the farmer's sweat and blood, are suddenly reduced to piles of rubble after every wild pig attack. These pigs don't just destroy the land, they also bring a host of other uncontrollable consequences, from diseases, environmental pollution, to the decline in biodiversity. And yet, we let them exist. Wild pigs, these invaders, are not native animals, but they are thriving. while our control measures are utterly ineffective. The government, the very people responsible for protecting the land and the lives of its people, stand by and watch this destruction unfold without taking decisive action. Allowing wild pigs to breed uncontrollably, no one dares to take strong action against them. No one dares to implement a tough solution. As a result, farmers, poor families, are enduring the consequences of lost harvests, failures year after year. And do you know what's even more infuriating? It's the indifference, the apathy of those responsible for stopping this destruction. We cannot continue to watch our country wither away because of an invasive species we can't control. It's time to act. Wild pigs cannot be the reason we continue to endure this disaster. We cannot let these animals continue to multiply. We cannot let them destroy everything like an uncontrollable wildfire. So why aren't the authorities, the relevant agencies, acting immediately to eliminate them? How many more harvests will be ruined? How many more farmers will face this tragedy? What's the answer, if not negligence, superficiality, and a lack of concern for the pain of the working people? How can we continue to watch these pigs destroy the land, kill an entire agricultural industry that millions of people depend on? We cannot continue to ignore this disaster. If we don't act now, if we don't stop the wild pigs invasion immediately, then this country will be nothing but a barren wasteland, a society overrun by invasive animals. It's time for us to stand up, to say no to the invasion of wild pigs and protect the land, the crops, and the lives of the people. Why should we tolerate these invasive wild pigs? How many more harves? This question echoes in the hearts and minds of every farmer across the country, fueling anger and fear. How much longer will we allow the destruction of our land, our hard-earned crops, simply because the government refuses to act? How many more acres of crops? How many more families will face ruin before someone in power stands up and stops this madness? The silence from the authorities is deafening, and the consequences of their inaction are devastating. The lack of government action isn't just frustrating, it's terrifying. The longer the authorities delay, the deeper the wound they inflict on our economy, especially on our farmers. These wild pigs are an existential threat, and yet we are left to fend for ourselves as our livelihoods are torn apart. The government has failed to intervene. They have failed to protect us. They have failed to stop the spread of these destructive creatures. And now, the damage is reaching catastrophic levels. So, how many more seasons will be ruined? How many more innocent lives will be shattered? This is not just an agricultural issue. This is a humanitarian crisis. We are watching families fall into deeper poverty as wild pigs continue to ravage their crops. The very people who feed this nation are being left to drown in the chaos that is spiraling out of control. How is it fair that hard-working farmers, who wake up at the crack of dawn to cultivate the land, are subjected to the daily horror of seeing their crops destroyed by an animal they cannot fight off? It's not just about the crops, it's about their futures. It's about their children's. The tragedy here isn't just the loss of crops, it's the loss of dreams, the loss of stability, and the loss of hope. These pigs are not just animals, they are the symbol of the government's failure to protect its citizens. The devastation they bring is a direct consequence of government inaction. Every destroyed crop, every shattered farmer, is the result of a system that has abandoned its people. How much more can the farming community endure before they are pushed to the brink? How many more lives will be ruined before someone in power wakes up to the crisis at hand? We can't continue to sit idly by as the people who feed us are systematically destroyed by a force we could have controlled. We cannot continue to tolerate thy. If we don't act now, wild pigs will become the rulers of the land, and the people will be left to live in the shadow of destruction. This isn't just a possibility. It's a terrifying reality we are on the brink of. Picture it, a future where every field, every farm, every inch of land is overtaken by wild pigs. A future where no crops are safe, no homes are untouched, and every farmer is forced to watch as their life's work is obliterated by these invaders. This isn't just about a few ruined fields or broken fences anymore. This is about the complete collapse of our agricultural system, and by extension, our way of life. If we don't take action now, we'll be left with nothing but the ruins of our past, a wasteland that will haunt our children and grandchildren. Wild pigs will reign over the land, and all we'll have left are the memories of what we once had. How many more crops need to be trampled? How many more homes must be destroyed? The government's failure to act could mean the end of rural life as we know it. We cannot stand by any longer. We cannot allow the invasion of wild pigs to continue unchecked. Every moment we delay is another moment they gain ground, another moment they destroy everything in their path. How long are we going to watch this happen? How much longer are we going to sit in silence while farmers, the backbone of our society, lose everything they've worked for? This is not a time for passivity. This is not a time to wait for someone else to act. This is the moment we must rise and say, no more. No more destruction, no more devastation, and no more suffering for our farmers. This is our land, our future, and we will not let it slip away into the hands of these animals. We must act now. We cannot afford to let wild pigs continue to thrive unchecked. Every day we let these pigs breed uncontrollably is another day they advance. Another day they spread farther into our communities, into our homes. And with every day that passes, more lives are ruined. How many families must be pushed to the brink of bankruptcy? How many more farmers must lose their livelihood before the government stops pretending this is not an emergency? How many more people must cry out in desperation before those in power hear their cries? The failure to act is unacceptable. It's criminal. If we don't intervene now, we will be left with nothing but the wreckage of a nation overtaken by invaders we could have stopped. The government's hesitation is costing us everything, and the time to wait has long passed. This isn't just a matter of protecting crops or land. It's a matter of protecting the soul of this nation. The farming community has given everything to this land, and yet we stand by and watch them lose it all to wild pigs. This isn't just their fight, it's everyone's fight. If we let this continue, we are all complicit in the destruction of our future. Every farmer who loses his fields, every home that's destroyed, every person who suffers the consequences of this unchecked invasion is a failure on the part of those who should have acted. The time for waiting is over. The time for action is now. We cannot afford to sit idly by any longer. It's time for the people to demand action and for the government to stop hiding behind excuses. If we don't stop this invasion now, there will be no land left to save. Many people defend animals to an extreme, but the wild pigs cannot be overlooked. It's true that we should protect animals, that we must safeguard wildlife, but there's a linear line that these wild pigs have crossed, and it's one we cannot ignore. The argument of animal rights should not be used as an excuse to let a species destroy entire ecosystems and wipe out the livelihoods of our farmers. Wild pigs are not just animals in the wild. They are an invasive force, a plague that destroys everything in its path. Yet there are people out there who seem to believe that the rights of these pigs outweigh the destruction they're... Yes, we must protect animals, but we also have a duty to protect our people, farmers, our communities, our way of life. We cannot continue to let wild pigs invade our land unchecked because a few people with misguided ideals refuse to recognize the danger. These aren't cute, harmless creatures roaming in the forest. These are violent invaders that are tearing apart our agricultural heartland. The longer we allow them to proliferate, the more damage they will cause, and the harder it will be to fix. But these animal rights activists? They sit in their ivory towers, detached from the reality on the ground, pushing for the protection of these wild pigs while the rest of us are left to pick up. We're not asking for the extinction of wild pigs, but we are demanding that they be controlled. Their unchecked breeding and expansion are a threat to the very foundation of our economy, our homes, and our future. There is no room for compromise here. We cannot let sentimentality and overblown ideologies dictate the fate of our country. The stakes are too high. The damage is too great. People are losing their livelihoods while these activists push for the same reckless leniency that allowed this disaster to begin in the fur. This is not an argument about animal rights, it's an argument about survival, about ensuring that we don't lose everything to creatures that have no place here. The wild pigs have crossed the line, and if we don't act, we will find ourselves living in a wild boars. The symbol of a failed society. Imagine this. You're a 21st century European farmer, equipped with modern machinery, surveillance technology, and even drones, yet you're completely helpless against wild boars. Not one, not 10, but hundreds, even thousands of them. Aggressive, cunning, hyper-reproductive beasts that ravage farmland like they own it. And the worst part? You're not allowed to shoot them. You're not allowed to trap them. You're only allowed to watch. This isn't satire. It's the daily reality in countries like Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and over 35 US states. Wild boars have become the most destructive, invasive species in the West, not because they're unstoppable forces of nature, but because they are protected by laws and a warped sense of environmental morality. Where did this boar apocalypse come from? It's not a natural disaster. It's not a virus. The wild boar invasion is a man-made catastrophe. First introduced to North America in the 1500s by Spanish explorers as a mobile food source. They were later imported again for recreational hunting. In Europe, misguided biodiversity restoration efforts saw governments reintroduce boars into forests with no predators, no natural balance, and full legal protection. These aren't your average pigs. They're muscular, sharp-tusked, intelligent, on par with domestic dogs, and they breed like rabbits. One sow can have 2-3 litters per year, with 5-12 piglets each time. A single breeding pair can produce hundreds of offspring in just a few years. No predators, no regulation. That's an unstoppable biological wrecking crew. The farmer, from breadwinner to victim. Farmers, the backbone of our society, have become victims. In Italy, a single night of boar activity can destroy a vineyard worth hundreds of thousands of euros. In France, they rip up wheat fields, collapse fences, block roads, and even raid urban gardens. In the US, the economic damage caused by wild boars exceeds $2.5 billion per year, not counting hidden costs like insurance, repairs, and lost productivity. And yet, what does the government do? In many places, boars are still classified as protected wildlife. A German farmer was once investigated for illegal killing of protected species after shooting a boar that broke into his chicken coop. In the US, it can take weeks to get a permit to kill one while the boars are busy producing a new generation in a matter of days. Eco-consciousness or moral hypocrisy? We're told to respect nature and preserve biodiversity. But no one talks about the consequences. When an invasive species spirals out of control, it's no longer naturates, an occupation. And Wetha Humansar handing over land to these invaders with a naive smile. Animal rights activists, nestled comfortably in urban office buildings, condemn boar hunting as inhumane. But they're not the ones being chased down by boars on their way to school. They're not the ones watching a year's harvest turn to mud overnight. Their version of compassion is selective, blind, and hypocritical. Should we go extreme? Some countries, like Australia, have launched large-scale campaigns to eradicate invasive rabbits, cats and, yes, wild pigs through aerial hunting, poison bait, and smart traps. Controversial? Yes. But at least they're doing something. In the US, experts have proposed year-round boar hunting, even cash bounties per kill, turning boars into a national target. Yet most governments remain paralyzed, trapped between maintaining their eco-friendly image and facing the actual crisis. Some say killing them is anti-nature, but leaving them to destroy millions of acres of crops, native plants, and wildlife is that nature? In conclusion, we're losing to pigs. We live in a world that can build space rockets, develop AI, and create robots but can't protect its food supply from a horde of wild pigs. This isn't just an environmental issue. This is a blunt, undeniable sign of systemic failure where misguided ethics, red tape, and urban idealism override rational action. It's a joke, a dark one, but one we're all living in. If we don't wake up soon, our children will grow up in a world where wild boars rule the countryside, and humans are the ones trespassing on their own farmland. A sweat and blood debate. Wild boars, to kill or not to kill? Picture a late afternoon in the Italian countryside. The sun begins to dip below the horizon. A farmer has just finished harvesting his wheat field. Sweat still clings to his brow. He stands before his golden crop, heart full of peace after a fruitful season. But then from the edge of the forest comes a sound he knows all too well, the unmistakable grunt of wild boars. Not one, not two or three, but an entire herd. More than 30 fully grown wild boars charge out like an armored battalion. They smash through fences, tear up soil, and turn golden fields into shredded dirt. Within just half an hour, everything is ruined, flattened, uprooted, as if a bomb had gone off. The farmer stands frozen. He is not allowed to fire his gun. The law says he needs a permit. He must file paperwork. He must wait for approval. But the boars do not wait. They come, they eat, they destroy, and they vanish into the woods like nothing happened. This is the spark that ignites a never-ending war of words, a fierce debate between urban animal lovers and rural farmers under siege. Side 1. The animal rights advocates. Who are they? They are animal rights activists, environmental bloggers, conservation influencers. They live in modern apartments in Berlin, Paris, and New York. They are vegans. They post articles with hashtags like Justice for Boars and demand a ban on using guns to kill wild pigs, calling it inhumane. In their eyes, wild boars are sentient beings. They feel, they bond, they suffer. Killing them with guns is cruel and promotes violence against nature. Instead of bullets, they advocate non-lethal alternatives, contraceptive injections, solar-powered fences, and even relocating boars to remote reserves. A spokesperson from a major European animal rights group once said, "We cannot kill in the name of human convenience. Taking the life of a wild pig is just as painful as killing a dog. We must change our mindset." It sounds noble, poetic even. But does reality agree? Side 2. The people who live with the problem. They do not blog. They do not tweet. They do not sip organic lattes in climate-controlled offices. They sweat under the sun. They dig in the soil. They feed their families by the yield of each field. And every time wild boars appear, they are not fascinating wildlife. They are nightmares with tusks. A melon farmer in Texas lost his entire crop in a single night. A family in central France saw their cattle attacked by wild pigs. 3 cows died from internal injuries. A farmer in southern Germany fell into over 300,000 euros in debt after 3 years of crop destruction. Their words are simple and raw. Don't preach to me about compassion when those animals just destroyed my only income. I don't hunt for fun. I hunt to survive. They are not bloodthirsty, but they are desperate. When they request permits to defend their land, the answer is often, "We're reviewing your case." And wild boars? They do not wait. They breed. They invade. A single female can produce up to 3 litters per year, with 7 to 10 piglets each time. In just 5 years, a single breeding pair can create over 600 pigs. This cycle never ends. Selective morality, the quiet accomplice. Nobody denies that wild boars are living beings, but when a species grows unchecked, destroys ecosystems, and causes widespread damage to human livelihoods, it is no longer a victim, it becomes an invader. Still, many choose to romanticize them. Look, how cute a mama boar and her babies. No one shares pictures of destroyed fields, collapsed barns, or children injured on their way to school after a boar attack. People pick the part of truth that fits their comfort. They prefer easy ethics and avoid the uncomfortable ones. The right to self-defense, the right to survive, the right to protect your land. So, should we use guns to hunt wild boars? The answer is this. When there is no other choice, we must act. Because farmers cannot stand by and watch their lives be torn apart. If modern society is too slow, too bureaucratic, and too afraid of criticism to act, then the people will act for themselves. Some U.S. states like Alabama and Georgia now allow year-round wild pig hunting with no bag limits. Some hold hog hunting tournaments to reduce populations. Australia once used helicopters to shoot wild boars from the air. In Japan, artificial intelligence and smart traps are used for targeted elimination. These solutions are controversial, but at least they are solutions, not just speeches. This is not a war against boars. It's a war against ourselves. The debate over whether to shoot wild boars is really a test of our collective maturity and moral clarity. Will we make the hard choices to protect what matters? Or will we hide behind pretty words while others suffer the consequences? One day, if you hear the snort of a wild boar in a public park, if your child is hurt on the way to school by a charging animal, if grocery prices skyrocket because crops are wiped out, remember, we had a choice, and we let comfortable morality shout louder than truth. Wild boars don't read manifestos. They don't care about hashtags. They care about one thing: feeding and breeding. If we do not act, we will be overrun by tusks, but by our own cowardice and naivety. Using guns to kill wild boars, justified defense, or blind massacre? We are facing a question that seems simple on the surface, but divides entire communities. Should we use guns to kill wild boars? One side calls it barbaric slaughter, while the other calls it necessary self-defense. But what is the truth, and what is moral theater disguised as compassion? Let's face reality. Today's wild boars are not innocent forest wanderers. They are invasive hybrids crossbred between domestic pigs and European wild boar, stronger, more aggressive, and reproducing faster than any other wild animal on the continent. They are not merely animals, they are a tusked threat spreading out of control. So when farmland is destroyed, property is wrecked, children are injured, who bears the cost? Not the animal rights activists, not the social media users posting "Love the Boars" hashtags. It's the working people, the families living on land that is slowly being overtaken. Using guns isn't a sport, nor is it some bloody form of entertainment as many claim. It is a last resort, an emergency response that farmers are forced to choose when the law is ineffective and nature has lost balance. It is survival through resistance, not mindless killing. No one wants a world full of gunfire, but this world is no longer peaceful enough for us to just plant flowers and hope for the best. When wild boars reproduce by the hundreds each year, when they cause billions in damage every harvest, then doing nothing becomes the real cruelty. When will society understand that morality cannot live in slogans alone? Sometimes, protecting human life demands decisive action. And sometimes, a gunshot is not a symbol of violence. It's the final cry of a community being suffocated by indifference and moral delusion. Protecting crops or destroying biodiversity? When a farmer raises his gun to aim at a herd of wild boars tearing through his cornfield, he's not thinking about biodiversity. He's thinking about food, livelihood, and survival. But somewhere, in the air-conditioned office of an environmental research center, someone protests, "Wait, don't shoot! They're part of nature!" And so the debate begins. Does killing wild boars to protect crops mean we're unwittingly destroying the very ecosystem we claim to defend? Animal rights advocates argue that wild boars play a role in the food chain, serving as prey for predators like wolves, bears, and birds of prey. They worry that large-scale extermination will upset the ecological balance, disrupt natural cycles, and ultimately harm the land farmers are trying to preserve. But farmers fire back. Then who will save me when my entire harvest is wiped out overnight? The truth is, nature has changed, and the old ecological rules may no longer apply. When a wild species becomes invasive, destructive, and uncontrollable, is it truly wise to protect it at all costs? Is that just naive idealism helping fuel the destruction? Free hunting, legitimate self-defense, or a dangerous gun culture? As rural communities are overwhelmed by the destruction caused by wild boars, some regions have turned to a bold solution: legalizing year-round hunting of wild pigs with no limits and no permits required. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. Everyone has the right to protect their land, especially when government bureaucracy is too slow to act. But this approach has triggered an immediate backlash from international organizations and citizens concerned about the expansion of civilian gun culture. Critics raise a serious question. If unrestricted hunting is legalized, who will control the consequences? Could this become an excuse for widespread, unregulated firearm ownership? Will forests turn into battlegrounds where anything that moves becomes a target? And what happens when a stray bullet misses a pig and hits an innocent bystander? To farmers living deep in the countryside, these warnings sound like mockery. They respond, "The wild boar doesn't knock on my door. It doesn't ask permission. So why should I have to wait for paperwork to protect my family and crops?" Caught between the fear of gun abuse and the fear of being overrun by wild animals, Society finds itself deeply divided, but without real, decisive action, both people and nature risk being consumed by chaos guns remain silent, while the boars never stop multiplying. Wild boars, dangerous invaders, or nature's scapegoats. Amid fear and frustration, wild boars have become public enemy number one for farmers. The media paints them as biological monsters, uncontrollable breeding machines, and the rural nightmare of Europe and America. But beneath the cries for extermination and the gunshots echoing through the woods, a quieter question begins to rise. Are we blaming wild boars for a disaster we created? Because in truth, wild boars didn't make themselves a problem. Humans did. We were the first species to bring them across continents where they didn't naturally belong. In the 16th century, European explorers introduced wild pigs to North America as mobile food sources. In the 19th and 20th centuries, they were imported again for sport hunting and entertainment. Later, as humans abandoned forests and domestic pigs escaped and bred with wild ones, a new creature was born stronger, more prolific, and more destructive. But whose fault is that? Some ecologists argue that deforestation, urban sprawl, and industrial agriculture disrupted natural ecosystems and gave species like wild boars the upper hand. They caution that labeling them invasive is a convenient way for humans to dodge accountability. These animals are not truly outsiders. They are byproducts of our flawed systems. But to people suffering real losses, philosophical debates don't fill their bellies. To them, wild boars aren't symbols of ecological imbalance. They are the face of hunger, destruction, and helplessness. They don't need a lecture on historical blame. They need solutions now. So, who's right? Who's wrong? Perhaps both are right. And perhaps both are simply speaking from different corners of a disaster that we, as humans, built together. Eradication incentives, effective solution, or blood sport. In the fight to control the exploding wild boar population, some U.S. states and European countries have turned to extreme tactics, offering cash rewards for every pig killed, organizing boar hunting competitions, even supplying participants with ammunition and gear. These measures have quickly divided public opinion. Some praise them as a smart biological control strategy, while others condemn them as a legalized form of violent entertainment. Supporters argue that when wild boars breed faster than nature can regulate, human hunting becomes the most efficient tool. A skilled hunter can eliminate dozens of boars each month, far more effective than sterilization programs or electric fences. Competitions also raise public awareness and foster community engagement in agricultural protection. They call it proactive food security, not passive victimhood. But the darker side cannot be ignored. When killing becomes a contest for prizes, morality gets twisted, and the line between protection and cruelty begins to blur. Cases have emerged of improper trapping, excessive use of firearms, and even collateral harm to non-target species or people. Critics warn that society is turning wildlife control into a blood-soaked scoreboard, where the lives of animals are reduced to point systems. So while bounty programs may slow down the boar population explosion, without clear limits, regulation, and ethical boundaries, we may eventually win the war against wild pigs only, to lose our own humanity in the process. Have governments abandoned farmers in this war? At climate change conferences, in 100-page biodiversity reports, and during campaigns promoting greener agriculture, farmers are praised as unsung heroes, the backbone of food security the front line of environmental protection. But behind those flattering words, when crops are destroyed by wild boars, when livestock are injured and fences torn down, a bitter question echoes, where is the government? In reality, most compensation programs for farmers affected by wild boars are symbolic at best, slow, and bogged down in red tape. Some require farmers to document damages daily, take photos, file reports, and wait months for approval, by which time the damage is already irreversible. In certain countries, compensation is only granted if the damage can be directly linked to wild boars. An almost impossible task at 3 in the morning when the herd has already vanished into the woods. Worse still, wildlife protection laws in some regions seem to prioritize the lives of wild boars over the livelihoods of people. Many farmers have been fined for setting traps, chasing off animals, or shooting without a permit. Not only do they lose their harvest, they are treated like criminals for defending their land. Meanwhile, government agencies issue orders from a distance, suggesting solutions that sound good on paper. Biological fencing, motion, activated cameras, early warning sensors. But who pays for the installation? Who maintains the equipment? And who stays up every night to watch for wild boars in the dark, if not the farmer? It's time to admit the truth. Many governments have abandoned farmers in this battle, or worse, are using them as a human shield to protect their image of ecological morality. But there is nothing moral about letting a family lose everything just to protect a herd of pigs breeding out of control.